Hello, this is Kathleen McKee of Oleans.com, Machine Embroidery Art.
Editing open paths or line sews. There's many different ways that you can edit your lines or your paths. We're going to start with the editing points under your select tool, and we're going to choose the select point tool. When you select an object, you can see where all the points you have laid down were put. When you have the edit tool or select point tool, you can move any of these points that you've already established, or you can add another point, or you can and notice when I add a point in there, it is added as a straight point. But if I select it and then right click it, I can change it to a curve point, or I can right click it and I can delete it. So you can change your design any way you want. Anytime you digitize something, it's not set in stone until you save it like you want it. Another thing about these straight open line sew is you can change the corners from flat, and keep your eye on those corners, to sharp. You see how it made these corners sharp? Look at them again as I turn it off. So the default, I believe, is the flat, but lots of times you're going to need that sharp corner. Now when you add a point to a curved line sew area, and you select it, we're going to add a point. It's going to take on the characteristics of the points before and after it, so it too is a curved point. You can right click it and change it to a straight, but I'm going to undo that, and I want it a curved. And you see these handles here? You can drag them out, and it makes them it's not such a hard, makes them a flatter, less curved. And then you can pull them in and make them like a sharper or a tighter curve. You also have the ability to put an under sew under your line sew, and or not, or the half stitch. Now in order to see what the half stitch does, I'm going to increase the width of this zigzag stitch, and I'm going to make it get pretty big. You see where these stitches get real tight up in those corners? When I click on the half stitch box, look how it pulls out these stitches. And that's very important in most of your sewing, because it's going to prevent your machine from breaking thread so often, and it's also going to prevent you from getting a hole cut out if you've got too many dense stitches coming in all at the same time. So as a rule, I always have this half stitch box checked. But the main editing you do with line sews mainly is changing the nature of the stitch itself. The default is a zigzag with a density of 4.5 millimeters lines per millimeters, and the zigzag width of 2 millimeters. You can change that and not have any line sewn at all. You might just need a path. In some applications you will need this, and I'll show you that in other lessons. Or it can be a running stitch. Let me get closer up on this. And with that running stitch, you can change the run pitch, in other words, the length of the stitches. You see how these stitches came further apart? I'm going to put it back to the default. The run times, I forgot to switch this back. The default is 1, but when you sew it out, let's go a little faster. It's just going to go once. But if you check run times 2, it's going to go once, and then it goes back and it goes again. I'll show you. Whoops. Try that again. I went too fast. Try that again on with 2. You see how it goes once, and then it goes back, and then it goes again. So I don't know why they call it runtime 2. Now the triple stitch, when you look at it on the software, it's hard to tell that it's a triple stitch unless you do your simulated sew out, and you can see it goes up, back, up, back. Let's slow that down a little bit. Up, back, up, back, up, back, so that each stitch is gone over 3 times. Then you have the motif stitch. Now the motif stitch is different in that anytime you choose a motif stitch, and when we get to region sew, the programmable fills, you're looking for a little folder. And when you open up the folder, it's going to show you all the different built-in options that your software has, and also all the programmable stitches that you have created yourself. In this case, I created a couple of chain stitches. You can see the difference. Okay, and let's go back to the default and say OK. Now also, when you use a motif stitch, you can change the size of it, but make sure you have this maintain aspect ratio box checked, so that when you decrease or increase the size, it will increase and decrease proportionately. Whoops, that's a little too small, isn't it? Now I'll go back to the default. Then we have the stem stitch, and it too can have its width and spacing and angles adjusted. The candle wicking stitch, it can be made smaller, and you can increase the distance between all the little candle wicking stitches. But I'm going to go back to the default. Then you have your EV stitch. We always called it a blanket stitch, and this is the stitch they use to tack down applique in most instances, and you can also adjust the width and the height of these stitches. And lastly, we have the chain stitch, and this is a new stitch, and I've not really found any applications for it yet, but it's there if I need it. And then of course we can always change the color by clicking on the thread and choosing the color there, or you can go to the sewing attributes box and go to color and choose a color there. And you can choose your color or your thread palette. I always stick with Brother embroidery because I don't want 250 choices of thread colors. I just use them as a guideline, so I don't want all those different colors up there, but you use whatever you want to use, but you have an option of just about all the major thread options out there on the market. And that's just about it for your basics on your editing open pass or line sew areas.